Podcastium 2 again. We're not going to sing this time.
Alright. And I am the other host, Tony, and I am also part of this thing. Imperium Podcastium Redux 2, double the hosts, double the Redux. Going to regret this.
Double the ducks.
I said Redux!
Are you guys gonna?
I guess I'll go next. I'm Tayo/Tio/ however you want to say my name. I'm resident moderator /shill. Hi.
Why Judas?
We also have Omega with us, but she's on the phone.
No, I'm not.
No, you're not.
No, it was the house phone ringing. I didn't want to talk while it was ringing in the background, but it hung
Fair
up.
enough.
So yeah, I'm Omega. I'm the oldest IoTer in terms of continuity of being here, but probably one of the youngest in age. I'm also the resident feminist and resident trans woman, and that's basically all there is to know about me.
I'm second oldest in terms of continuity. Woo.
Hey, when is your birthday? You want one?
Me?
No, Omega.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear the question.
Only wanted to know when your birthday is.
Oh, March 12th, 1997.
Damn.
Oh wow, you're a small bab.
1 month younger than me.
Yeah, and I'm 1 grade above you. That's kind of weird.
And if you hear a fifth voice, that's James, and he's on a phone.
I'm pretty sure he's 16 or 12.
Child.
You're still 12 to me, son.
Thanks.
All right. I guess Tony will take it away, right? Or double A, whichever one of you.
God, no, don't give me any responsibility.
Alright, so the first topic of this podcast will be the question that has always been asked through the years. What is yacht? Alright, you go.
It's a horror game.
IoT is a clusterfuck of the ages.
It's a horror game.
I already made that joke.
Cannon water.
My serious answer is that IoT is a collaborative story.
We're getting some feedback there.
I'm going to pause you right there.
Yes.
Something was up with your mic right there.
Yeah, Valker is pinging me on Steam and asking me to stop if that's a
piss.
Alright.
Yes, please. I guess I'll go next. I guess my definition of an IoT is a lot more specific. I like to think of them pretty much completely as geopolitical games rather than some of the other things that have come up in IoT. Not to say they're bad games, but other things that I don't believe fit IoT. I guess we can get into that later or now. I don't know which one. But yeah, I think IoT is a kind of geopolitical game where the players affect the world in meaningful ways, and the GM basically dictates the rule of that world.
Or otherwise it falls into chaos.
Honestly, I've been doing this kind of shit since like 2009, which is about a third of my whole life. And I was in this game called God Save the King on Total War Center. And it was around for, I don't know, half a decade or something like that. And over time, I kind of started to define it as the community that played the game rather than the game itself. And I've kind of come to do that with IoT as well. So anything we do is an IoT because we're all IoTers, and by definition, all degenerates.
I had to make a huge disagreement on the term game. I don't consider IoT to be a game because I don't really think there's any sort of objective to it. There's no winning or losing. It's really just us telling a story collaboratively. That's why I always use a collaborative story rather than a game.
Game's shorter, though.
I know, but it clouds it.
Do you want to reply to that, Double A?
I mean, I actually kind of agree. Like, there's really two definitions of IoT to me. One is the community itself, and the other is a game, or rather, collaborative story effort that we play. And like, there's the classical shit that we do, which is, everyone tries to conquer the world or sit on their own little corner of it and just do whatever the hell they want. And then there's like everything else.
I was just going to say XIX just launched, which is an example of that classic.
Yeah, that's a classical one.
We'll
With
get
a
into that.
classical map too.
And we also have choose your own adventures and I guess Nesses as well. But I basically consider those IoTs because I don't know what else to call them.
Trash.
It's all trash.
Let's call them games, not IoTs or NESs or whatever. Isn't that simpler?
I'll give my input now. I think those are fair viewpoints. I just disagree with them on like it's a disagreement, but it's not like a disagreement that's a problem. I guess it's more of like I do think IoTs are games. Maybe they might not have objective like it sounds kind of redundant, but objectives. But they do have like I feel like every player has a goal in mind in terms of what they want to do with the game when they join it, or IoT, I guess I'll use when they join it. So I like to think of it as a game in that respect. And yeah, I don't really. Yeah, I think I'll just wrap up my thought with that, actually.
I mean, an author has an objective when they write a book, but we don't call book writing a game.
Well, I'm not. I don't mean that. Well, in order to be classified as a game, it's not just about like objectives. Yeah, and I was only bringing up just that point because you brought up the point of objectives. I actually took a game design class in which we talked about what makes a game a game. Let me think. Let me try to remember what. It's interesting because in the industry, a lot of different people will give you different answers depending on who they are of what makes a game a game. My specific instructor, I believe.
All games have objectives.
Well, to be fair, if games are defined by having objectives, then IOTs wouldn't be games because most IOTs don't have real objective except conquering the world.
Yeah,
which isn't really an objective.
That's kind of what we're talking about. But in order to be considered a game, I think there's no objective game, like definition of a game that I know of, in terms of like what industry people think. Games have a variety of definitions depending on who you ask, and I guess that kind of like ties into what I mean when I call IoT a game. Like it's a game in from my perspective because I consider it like something that you interact with, that is more, like it's, how can I say it? It's interactive. There's conflict. There aren't objective goals, but I feel like there are personal goals a lot of times, and so that's like, yeah.
But there aren't explicit winning objectives given by the GM most of the time.
Sure, but the same thing can be said about Paradox games. They don't have like sure you can deduce that the objective is not to die, but there's nowhere in a Paradox game where it says your objective can't be to do so and so and end up losing.
Well,
I think everyone comes into these games with a objective that they kind of just puzzle out that they think they're supposed to do, exactly like Paradox, and they just keep on doing that for the rest of their career, or whatever the hell you want to call it, as an IoTer or a Paradox gamer, unless something significant happens to change it.
I'm going to argue that there are objectives in Paradox games in the forms of missions that give you cores and whatnot, and armies and so on. They are designed to direct your nation in a realistic direction, like, for an example, France expanding into Burgundy and not into Spain, despite that exactly.
That's a good point.
And
Okay, go ahead.
and also, Paradox games exist solely to be played. And IoT, the game itself doesn't really take that much precedence compared to the lore that we write about it, the stories that we write about our characters, or the updates of the game. We care more about that than just necessarily painting the map, unlike a Paradox game.
Well, yes, perhaps.
I mean,
There are arts that, where you can make up your own story. They are kind of like IoTs, but they are focused more on the story side, while the game does the number side, the stats.
Oh, what were you gonna say, James?
I guess like it depends because we have later on like story versus stats. I guess some of the more stats-based games might be like looked at as games, whereas the story-based games might be like more telling stories.
That's topic 6, by the way.
Yes.
Yeah, we'll get into that specific argument later. I think we should wrap this one up. I'm going to end on I guess a final reply to the last thing that Meg said. I see that point that like Paradox games are, they are without a doubt games, and so they are made to be played, like you said. But I don't think that classifying. I don't really think that's really a specific classification you can make. Is something a game just because you intend it to be a game? Perhaps, but perhaps it's just. It's like I said before. It's like a thing that's not really a problem, but it's something that is there. I suppose the difference between a game and an interactive story. I guess. Food for thought.
I see what you mean.
I like food.
So yeah, Tony, you can introduce the next thing now.
The next topic is
Okay, hold on a
GM.
second. Sorry. Reyes has to reintroduce ourselves because he doesn't know who's speaking whenever.
Um,
So just say your name. I'm Double A.
I'm Omega, the best one of the bunch.
You are.
And you know me, I am Tony, the best after mix, of course.
I am the T person, the T person that's better than Tony and the other guys, and that
Betrayed
person's
everyone by becoming a mod and a shoe.
And the
I'll
other one
fight
is
you.
James. Okay, but yeah, Tony, please continue.
The next topic is COGMs and how they work and what are the benefits and the cons and so on.
I think we need Krezif for that.
Well, no, we have Tony.
Yeah.
Oh yeah,
It's
but you
not
haven't
really-
actually started your game yet.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but they had fights.
Who? Me?
Yeah,
I
remember
don't-
that dispute you had over elected governments?
Yes, but that was super minor and we solved it at... No, we didn't have sex. Alright, never mind.
This is internet drama. You're supposed to exaggerate it and make the other person look terrible.
But NC isn't terrible. He's the best person on
Oh
the...
wait, we do have James,
Earth.
who's co-GMing a goddamn Gordon Ramsay IoT with Cived, and it is the most beautiful thing I have ever seen.
It is the
Oh.
biggest competitor.
All right, James, take the floor.
I guess a problem with co-GMs is time zones because I see Cived like once every 2 days. And
Yeah,
so
that would suck.
yeah, there's like a rift in communicating.
Isn't the time zone between NC and Tony even bigger than yours and
Yeah,
Wooter?
but Tony's like literally always on.
Voucher, sorry.
Also, I don't sleep.
Yeah, you're basically Batman, but Bulgarian.
No. I'm
Um,
Batman.
I guess I'll throw in here with some theorizing. I never actually co-GM'd, but I guess I can throw out some ideas about it. So, it's been tried before several times, and pretty much all of them have, unless I'm mistaken, ended in pretty much failure. So I think that it's not impossible. Like I don't think there's a rule regarding like all co-GM'd games die. I think that it's all to do with planning, I guess.
And the personalities.
Oh yeah, and the personality. Like you have to have pretty good chemistry, I guess. Not in a romantic way, though. I wouldn't stop anyone.
Or is it?
I won't stop anyone. But I think.
Alright, so now, can I talk? I mean,
sure, go ahead. I'm just throwing words out.
well, I think that co-GMs are really useful because, as you may know, I am not really a numbers guy, but I see that there is a need for numbers and stats that will be covered in 6 because whatever. And not to mention that, well, I think that NC is a very cool person and I find him great. And, well, here's a more selfish reason why I'm co-GMing. Well, because sometimes, have you ever felt that you can bear the players and with their silly antics? Wouldn't it be great if you could complain to someone who is also running along the game with you?
Want to drop some names?
No.
Me.
Okay. Good points.
I'm made of silly antics. I would literally die if I could not shenanigan up all in this bitch.
Basically, antics.
Alright, unless someone wants to continue, I wanna sort of go.
I think there's still a little bit more discussion to be had here. I think that what are they called? There are distinct advantages to co-GMing, and they are kind of like, it's kind of a trade-off, right? Like co-GMing can be hard to do, but the results can be kind of exponentially better, or I don't know whether if it's.
I mean, GMing itself is hard to do.
Yeah.
And also by having NC to focus on the stats, I can focus 100% on, alright, wasting my time in your chat, but also writing the updates so that it can be great and everyone can enjoy it, and not having to worry about stats and numbers and balancing the rule set. I can just leave that to NC, which makes me sound now like a giant asshole. Alright.
Right. Megs, go ahead.
Okay, so one thing I want to point out is that before Nuka and Xrez did Black and Skies, the only real example of a co-GM was way back in the day with Tanny and Thor with the some of the multipolarity games.
Yeah.
And well, like I said, with personality, that didn't end up going well. But I think another issue is that you need to have responsibilities with the mods. Like, for example, the NPC GM concept, which Thor was, it didn't really have that much of an actual purpose to it. Anything Thor did, Tanny really could have done himself. There wasn't really a good division of labor between the two of them.
I think they were just doing it for the sake of co-GMing, but Krezif and Nuka are dividing their responsibilities pretty clearly, and Krezif is handling mechanics and Nuke's handling a bunch of flavor stuff that's pretty necessary to the way the game is working.
To be fair, if I may intervene here, you're not entirely right about Krez's role, which actually created problems because she had also talked to us about the game and how our decisions could influence.
Oh no, she does that. I think that's fair reason for both.
Yeah, great. It's useful, especially considering Nuka doesn't come on your chat.
Right. So I think there is some more discussion to be had here, but I think it's best to have people that's been involved in it more. So I think we should move on.
True.
Yeah, we should go to the next topic.
Next topic
actually let them weigh in.
Well, the next topic. All right. Can I announce now? So, the next topic following is popular games out right now. Why are they popular, I guess, and what makes them work so well?
So we're talking about historic games that are still popular. Is that the topic?
Out right
Out
now,
right now.
which is like 5 games.
Well,
We've got Blackened Skies, Gourd IoT, Heirs to Heaven, and I guess IoT 19. Arcanum hasn't quite launched yet, and neither has Angst's arena game, The Fated Dead. And Three
Well-
Kingdoms by Christos seems to have just not launched.
all right.
And
How,
supposedly Empires of Joy is coming back, but I kind of doubt it myself.
how about we
Yeah.
change then the topic to why do some games have more signups than others? Why does Arcanum, for example,
Yeah, that's a good topic.
have more signups than, for example, Christos 3 Kingdoms or even Hordiot or like EX, which is out 19, has more signups all at once while being a classic game, which would be considered, I guess.
I guess like
I think part of it is popularity of the people. I mean,
Yeah.
Sohn and Tio get lots of signups because they're, well, in Sohn's case, it's because he has or had a track record of having great games that would be consistent and update. And Tio, as much shit as we give him, is actually a very likable person and is the master at hyping up his concepts, even if they not always end up going well, but you give it your heart and we all appreciate that. Meanwhile, somebody like Christos tends to release more niche games, maybe not have the best track record, or no, Christos does. Christos
He
actually
does.
has a great track record.
He's probably one of the only GMs to have finished a game.
Yeah, but yeah, you're absolutely right. But some other people who don't get signups, I don't really want to call them out or anything. They kind of like do niche games, not necessarily always launch them, and you kind of get a reputation after a while that your games aren't going to be stable. I mean, I only did 2 games in my entire life because I am afraid of getting that stigma myself. One of them ended up not launching, and I'm kind of afraid about that. I'm going to get that stigma now.
Well, on that, this is why I actually wanted to co-GM, because after running the awfully failed via Victis, I realized that apparently basic arithmetic is not my suite and I can't do numbers. So I needed someone like NC who will do the numbers while I'll do the writing. So pretty much the whole agreement. Alright, did I turn this into another co-GMing topic or should I go on?
I don't think we need to go back to co-jamming.
Yeah, we're pretty good right here. And I think another reason why some games appeal and others don't is because it's like, okay, if there's already 4 games out and you're in all of them and someone starts up a 5th, you probably don't really want to join the 5th game. Or if you do, you might drop some of the other games and you'll feel like a dick for doing that.
Not always. I mean, I didn't feel like a dick dropping from Joy.
Well,
Yeah, I just kind of feel an obligation to see through a game until I either totally lose interest or the GM does.
well, think about choice that making orders for it well. It takes longer than other games, alright? And I couldn't possibly divert my focus from updating. Right,
I
I'll
guess the
stop here.
complexity of a game matters.
What?
Like how complex a game is. Like if you have like a bunch of really complex games running, only a couple of them are going to get a bunch of signups.
Yeah, you're right. We do as a community tend to favor only like 2 complex games at the most at a time, and any more will just create like IoT bloat, I guess.
Yeah, another thing is concept. People don't really like niche topics that like only the moderator cares about. I know some games have died because they're great games with great rule sets, and the moderator clearly knows what they're doing, but nobody just really cares about the game because nobody watched that show that they're trying to reference, or nobody played the game or read the book or whatnot.
Yeah, I think that's a good point.
Agreed. So you need to make broad appeal, but I guess not too broad.
Well, classics are very broad and everybody loves them.
Yeah,
Well,
that's
because they're classics.
Fair
yeah.
enough.
They're a special circumstance. The other thing is everyone just likes Robert, and he is like the most prolific classic GMer. I would have to say.
I
think-
feel unloved right now.
I mean, in recent years, like the past two, I think he's released more of the Roman numeral ones than anyone else.
Well, he only did 2.
Exactly. That is twice as many as his competition.
I would love it if Thor did a game at any point.
You should do a game, Thor.
Well,
aren't they kind of?
Robbie's doing a game with Thor, but I would easily swoop with him. I'll take him from Robbie.
Well, that's why they're running a game together now.
Righto. It sounds like this one has ended pretty naturally. Perhaps move on to the next one.
Yeah, that would be, what can we learn from video games about making good IoTs?
Found the topics.
Kind of circling back a little bit here.
Yeah. Well, first off, we can learn that absolutely no story is a positive, and you have to appeal to the lowest common denominator and make everything really dumb.
That's how why did I write all these texts? I could have just said, "Oh, there's did it," but I didn't. Got too ordered for, I think.
Anyways, being a bit more, I don't know whether to say serious or not, but to answer the, or get to the point rather, I think I am definitely biased here because of my major in university. I think IoTs can learn a lot from like actual video games. Not just talking about Paradox, where it's incredibly obvious how we can learn from it, but game design is very. It's a very like. How can I say it's something that you have to ask a lot of questions for. Like whenever you add a mechanic or you add an aspect to a game, you kind of want to ask yourself, why am I doing this? And if you can't come up with a really good reason, there's literally no good reason to put it in. And that can go a long way in making sure that your game is consistent as well as what's the other word? Consistent as well as, I guess, not tedious.
I think another thing that we need to learn from games, especially in terms of like a complex IoT, is you need to be like multidisciplinary and not just focus on one thing. If you're making a complicated game, you need to have equal love everywhere.
That's I can hear that. For example, I believe the longest time, war is probably the most designed mechanic in IoT, while economy for the longest time was very watered down. That's probably everything to do with the player base at that time. That time being years ago, when all of us were angsty teenagers who only wanted to kill each other.
Some of us still are, like me.
Right.
Oh, does that mean that we're all generals or something? We have a degree in military science because we all make war mechanics detailed.
Right. So I think that's a really good point. If you want to make a complex game, and if you just don't want it to be a war game too, I guess that's a good point too. If you're just making a war game, like a Risk kind of game, that's maybe a little more complex or maybe not. That's not my real point. My point is that if you want to make a war game, or you want to make a certain if you want to consider a game complex, I guess it's good to, like Double A said, to show love everywhere rather than just creating kind of a glorified war game, which is not bad, by the way. If you want to make a war game and you have fun mechanics that can translate well into a text-based medium, by all means. But I guess the biggest point here is to kind of both be consistent and transparent with what you want your game to do, and yeah.
Yeah, it's like if you make a game that only has solid war rules, you're going to see a lot more war than something that has war and economy rules. It's like in EU4, there's really not much to do other than war. You're not going to have fun if you build up tall unless you take immense pleasure in your own suffering. But in Vicky 2, you can stay at peace the whole game and you'll have fun.
All
Yeah.
right, but if that's the case, then why isn't there more economic focus in Sun Yachts, for an example?
Because that's a lot harder to make fun than war.
Oh.
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah, really only Sun finds fun with it because that's his major. It would be kind of like me doing a lot of internal politics stuff because I'm a political science major.
Well, he did try modeling internal
That would be really
politics.
fun, by the way.
Well, for some people, but I'm sure others would just find it really tedious.
Wow.
That's a pretty good point that to bring up, that, like how certain mechanics might actually just might make the game
Encourage.
like. That's an interesting point. Like it's not really a bad thing to do, like to make a game focused on internal politics, but if it's international, that might take away from the international stage. And yeah, like that's a good point. I haven't really thought about a lot about it.
So one thing I really been dying to say since this topic has been introduced is, remember a few months ago when I wrote that essay, The Living World, and I talk about like the idea of conflict in a game. Well, I feel like the biggest lesson that we could take from a video game is, like, in the first two Mass Effect games, the choices that you make in Mass Effect mattered. It mattered a lot, whether or not you killed Arachnes or who you left to die in Vermeer. Like, it really affected the plot. And then by the third game, everybody got pissed off because you just got colored explosions at the end, no matter what the choices you made leading up to it. And people really want agency in IoTs, and agency is probably the most important thing, I think, in an IoT.
I think you're absolutely right. That's why I was pissed off by the Mass Effect 3 ending personally. And if
Who
someone,
wasn't?
yeah, really. But if
I
someone,
wasn't, because I can't never read it.
if a GM pulled something like that where my choices didn't even matter, I would not enjoy the game.
Well,
Like
that's what they
EQ's
call
games.
railroading. Right.
I didn't hear that, but I think we should let Megs finish.
Well,
Oh no, all I just said was like EQ's games. I was giving an example to what AA said.
Oh, okay. Okay, Tony, can you repeat that?
I was just clarifying that what A said is what you call railroading, right?
Correct.
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
Yes, nobody likes railroading, but at the same point, railroading is also kind of important to get a cohesive narrative going, because you can't just let players do whatever they want, or else you get examples like Chuck Norris becoming the president of France in a serious game. You gotta like nudge your players to do what you want them to do without making them think that you're doing what you want them to do.
Well, as Meg said, railroading is good so long as you don't get caught. Basically, don't hold the railroad.
That's a good way.
That's actually, yeah.
That's a good way to put it. Actually,
I think it's fine when GMs do a little bit. They just push people in the right direction. But if you try to make a army or something and invade France, and then not only does the army not get built, but you have a navy instead, and you invade America with it, that would be really fucking weird. But I don't think anyone's doing that.
yeah,
I can. Doubt it.
yeah, I can see
Okay.
this. Yo,
Like there's a very clear line when it comes to railroading.
Yeah, I mean, I've heard horror examples of NESs where mods will just flat out ignore what people ordered in their orders, and just so they can do whatever the hell they want. And at that point, is why don't you just write a book?
Oh god, I was making up an example to be like ridiculous and extreme, but if that's actually a thing that's happened, I will.
Oh yeah, I've actually
probably
had it
need to go
happen
eat
to
some ice
me.
cream or something.
Well, I heard that AQ did that. I heard horror stories how he railroads everyone.
Like it actually happened to me in a few NESs. Like I would just have my orders completely disregarded, and something else happened. And sometimes sometimes, like especially early on when I was like 12 or 13, I was just probably doing stupid shit. Like one time I tried to get Canada to join the Central Powers in World War One. I do think at that
Oh my
case,
God.
yeah, that was probably justified. But in one other NES, I was America during the Napoleonic Wars, and I tried to just do the very historical Louisiana Purchase. And because of that, for some reason, I don't know why, the entire West decided to revolt against me, and then Spain invaded me. And I what the hell?
Well, who was a GM? Do you remember?
No, some guy who isn't on CSC anymore.
I'm okay with that.
okay. I guess the overall thing with that is like railroading is important in terms of building a consistent world, but you can't railroad it such that you completely ignore what your players want to do with their respective entities.
Well, I think that railroading is good just to keep you on the railroad, but you make the way as that.
Like there is a
I know what you
railroad,
mean.
and you just
There's
like
a railroad, yes, but you're making the way to. You're making the destination, the road. The player is that is not the GM, but the GM makes sure there's a railroad.
I can see that point.
And not only. And one thing is that the mods have to also try to make sure that everybody's railroads are converging on each other, which can be quite the Herculean achievement to do, considering some games, some people just doing completely random different things, and trying to bring that all together can be really hard. And I really respect Robbie for doing that in XIV.
Well, yes, that is probably something I'll have to do.
Okay.
Yeah, I do not envy you, Tony, not one bit.
Oh well, I'll solve it the simple way. Make every continent completely isolated and pretend globalism never happens. Or pray that it doesn't.
Alrighty then. It seems that it's time for the moment we've all been waiting for. That sixth thing on the checklist.
Yeah.
Card games on motorcycles.
Yeah!
Let's do that one instead, honestly.
Let us begin
I haven't watched since Battle City, to be quite honest.
in America.
I'm just watching Yu-Gi-Oh! Abridged, and that's all the Yu-Gi-Oh! I need.
Alright,
Same
let
AF.
us introduce the sixth and final topic, the topic you've been all waiting for. I sound cringy. Alright, storyots vs statiots. Who is better, who is worse, and why are we still talking about this?
Because it's fun.
Those I like wanking off. With essays, of course.
Oh, yeah. Wait, who's going first? I didn't hear Tony, I'm sorry.
What?
I don't think we have a turn person. If you want to go first, speak up. I'll go first if there's
I don't know.
Meg's your. What was that,
Well-
Tony?
I mean, aren't we all speaking our opinions, even the hosts?
Yeah.
Well, alright, let's get on with it. Who wants to first?
So
Oh, go ahead.
okay, so people probably originally know me as probably being the biggest advocate for story over stats. Me and Thor are usually the old guard, so to speak, on this issue. And I still have a lot of sympathy towards that. I still feel like story is more important than stats. And I made a pizza analogy on my thread about how story is more important because you can't have a pizza without the bread, but you can technically have a pizza without the cheese, even if everybody bitches about it. I eat cheeseless pizzas. I'm not apologizing for that.
Right.
We're definitely good at bitching about things here.
Of
But
course,
I guess
Riot.
But I guess the main point I'm trying to bring at is that I don't really feel like this is really an argument anymore. I feel like some people like this. I don't know where I was going with this. I'm sorry.
I'll take from there because I think I have a pretty good idea. I actually kind of agree that I don't really think this is much of a discuss. Like, there's not much of a discussion to be had on this anymore. I mean, maybe a little bit, but I think that story and stats are kind of like the same thing as bring in the game thing again. Like the mechanics of a game and the story the game tells. Like, I think that's the kind of dynamic that stats and story in the context of IoT should probably have. Like, there are games that have plenty of story and very little game, but they're celebrated as very good. For example,
Or walking simulators.
Yeah, basically. A very good example would probably be any Telltale series game. Honestly, they're pretty good stories. They're whether or not they're games, they're interactive, and they're sold on like Steam and stuff. But so yeah, they're praised as good games, but they're like in terms of the thing that you're actually playing, you're not really playing much. Meanwhile, there are games that are completely you're just playing them with no real story.
Like every game made before the 80s.
Yeah, pretty much.
I'm talking about IoTs and not video games in general.
Well, yes, but I me being the biased person I am, I believe that they pretty much. I believe IoTs are pretty much games.
It's really weird though because IoT started out as basically just a story and not really anything substantial mechanics wise, whereas video games were the opposite completely. There was no story in games until probably the 80s. Like Pong, no story whatsoever.
I thought that didn't IoT initially originate well as an exercise in painting maps, like, which are colors.
Yeah,
Well, I'd say IoT probably has more to do with write your own story in terms of origin than painting maps. It might have started on the altered maps thread and moved on from there, but the actual community was really largely from write your own story.
I guess. Well, unless anyone wants to go on, I will use the word.
I think there's still discussion to be had about this. So, while I guess this is kind of like while they have different origins, I still think that there's a lot to be applied here, simply because of the realities, the similar realities there are now. The very existence between a stats versus story thing is something that I think kind of proves the relationship between IoTs and games, where you can have a mixture of both, or you can have one or the other, and there are successful versions of each of these. For example, risk games. Sometimes they could have a little bit of quote unquote stories where it's mainly just double A trolling, but
YOLO.
they're primarily just war games, and they can be they have been pretty successful. I mean, like, it's not hard to run a successful risk game, but that's besides the point. The point is you can run a good game based solely on mechanic, a good IoT rather based solely on mechanics. Or
can I interrupt you for a moment?
Sure.
What does successful mean?
I guess successful.
More than 3 turns.
Like, yeah, it's
See, I would define successful as the legacy of bots, and this is where I have to kind of disagree with Tio a bit. I do feel like story IoTs have been a lot more successful because they're the ones that we talk about years later. Yes, risk IoTs survive and maybe even end because it is a board game, but no one really tells stories or reminiscences about those risks. They just
Except me.
happen and in the end. Nobody really cares about, like, for example, AA and Black Hole after like a month afterwards because we kind of move on and just play the other stat game. But people remember XIV. They remember the stuff we did in that game or what we did in Idiot. And even still IoT 4 in some aspects, even if that's just me and Thor at this point.
Okay, I'm going to bring up a counterpoint, being Tetris. Everyone's played Tetris. Everyone's probably had that one Tetris moment, but no one really tells stories about Tetris in this day and age.
Oh, I can tell a Tetris story about that guy in the West who became a grandmaster. Like only one outside of Japan. I actually watched that video while it happened, and it was actually a very interesting moment.
You're undermining your own point.
That's kind of yeah. I don't think that really counts. It's not really about the game itself at that point. It's more about the story.
It's more about the story of the guy who played the game than what he did in the game, because you didn't.
Oh
tell
yeah,
us
he
what
became
did.
grandmaster. That's
It's just like Black Hole on AA. Not he remembers it because he played it and he succeeded, not because of the game.
Yeah, like the reason I remember Black Hole so well is because I won the game in, the definitions that we were using at the time, not because of any specific instance during the game, like the invasion of Asia that I pulled off. I don't talk about that. I just say, hey, I won the fucking game. I'm great.
Also because you kept on repeating on it years since it ended. That's probably helped.
Yep.
Yeah, that's kind of like the same. I feel like that's kind of the same. It's definitely not the same exact thing. I mean, that guy, he made a name for himself and such.
Well, it's not like when Megs brought up the story, she didn't say he cleared 8 rows with 2 pieces. She just said he won the thing and became a grandmaster.
Right.
Grandmaster, not great master.
Right.
I said grand.
So
but it's the
grand.
same.
I say grand.
But it's the same. Like either way, that's just the words. Just words. The point is, like, yeah, that story is more about like the person than the game, and meanwhile, you can kind of on the same token, if you're playing a different game, like for example Mass Effect, and you had this one really rad engagement that you had to tell all your friends about, and like you still kind of remember to this day. Like that's a kind of an example of something that you brought up with the games that we remember. I believe one would be this. One time, I believe Mosher was playing. Mosher's an older IoTer, by the way. He actually recently came back. He's in Nuka's and Krez's IoT rather, I guess now.
It's also 19.
Mosher's a little
May I
turd.
talk about Mass Effect? The issue with Mass Effect example is that, well, it's not completely story. There's mechanics. You still have to care about your health and your weapons and so on. So it's not completely empty of mechanics.
Right, but that's not really what I'm looking at. I'm looking more at like.
I think I actually kind of mentioned this in my essay with this whole it's about the person rather than it's about the game. I used the example of Monopoly in particular in that instance. And I talked about how actually, when you said at the beginning that stats don't tell stories and that it's always about the people more than the stats themselves. And I'm kind of getting what you mean. I mean, I already kind of said it myself now that I think about it, just in a different way.
Yeah, I mean,
kind of.
those kind of shenanigans are kind of important to me for whatever reason. I'm no psychologist and I can't remember shit, so I don't know how to go into that. But it's like, I'll remember that longer than I will anything I've done in an IoT that was significant story-wise.
Yes, probably same with me. That one time in IoT E2, in which I basically destroyed an entire person just by spamming broken espionage mechanics, even though I was exiled from my mainland. And at one point, I only had territories that I took from other people. It was a great experience all around. That person doesn't exist on IoT anymore either. I might have ruined it for him.
Who's that person?
Remember that one time when I invented terrorism?
And Son invented slavery
How
and
once
that
I
one,
once.
multipolarity.
Wow.
Right. So, I think we got the point across here. There's still somewhat of a discussion to be had about stories versus stats, but in the end, I think the discussion is mostly over. People are going to still make games that are one, the other, or a mixture of the two, and I think that's totally fine.
Yes, so long as they're having fun. That's the important
It's basically
part.
capitalism versus socialism. Everyone touts one of them, but in reality, everyone just does both.
Yeah, kind of.
I agree.
Well, to be fair, I don't think that the socialism vs capitalism analogy is really appropriate because, well, it's far more complicated.
Well, analogies take a complicated thing and make it uncomplicated. That's the entire
And
point.
also apply to something else completely unrelated to it, I think.
Anyways,
Maybe.
I think that has run its course. So, do we have any plans to wrap this up? Because I believe that we're pretty much done.
To give a closing statement, buy gold, don't trust cops.
Women are better than men.
This podcast is not sponsored by libertarianism whatsoever.
It is sponsored by feminism, though.
Sign up for Arcanum, you bitches. Now!
This podcast brought to you by botulism.
Also Nestle and coffee and exploitation of third world countries.
Right. If that's this is going so well and then this happened, I'm closing the stream.
That's probably